An ordinary summer day in Istanbul. An apartment security camera records 22-year-old nursing student Ayşe Tokyaz and 38-year-old Cemil Koç entering the building together. This is the last recorded image of Aisha. Hours later, that same camera captures Cemil Koç exiting the building. But this time, he was not alone. The suitcase he carried wasn't just filled with belongings. Inside, it carried the entire weight of an ended life and of shattered dreams. What happened between these two recordings wasn't just the story of this tragedy, but also the dark story of overlooked warning signs and an unresolved past. Aisha and her twin Esra were 22-year-old final-year nursing students at a university in Istanbul. In this massive metropolis, they faced life shoulder to shoulder, as each other's closest confidant and strongest support. Nearing the end of their education, they eagerly awaited the day they would receive their diplomas and step into professional life. For them, having a twin meant having a reliable teammate against every challenge they faced. Aisha's life changed in March 2025 when she met Cemil. Cemil, whom she met on a social media app, introduced himself as a former police officer, 16 years her senior. For a young student, this profile initially offered a promise of maturity, experience, and stability. The dialogues that began in the virtual world soon moved into real life and turned into a relationship. This initial phase of the relationship was, from Aisha's perspective, quite impressive. Cemil initially portrayed himself as a generous and extremely attentive partner. He bought Aisha expensive gifts and, by being in constant communication, quickly placed himself at the center of her life. For Aisha, these actions were intense romantic gestures that reinforced the sense of security and stability she was looking for. However, this intense attention was the first step of Cemil's skillfully hidden manipulative character. These intense romantic gestures soon gave way to psychological pressure. Cemil's interest turned into a force that restricted Aisha's life. Using the connections he had from being a former police officer, he unlawfully obtained private information about Aisha and her family, using this information as a tool to interfere in her life and intimidate her. For example, when Aisha stayed at a hotel with her friends, Cemil would immediately find out and call to question her. Cemil was trying to make himself the primary and most important person in Aisha's life. This situation was not fully recognized at first, even by her twin sister, Esra. Esra could not yet see the full depth of the psychological pressure Aisha was experiencing. The pressure soon escalated from psychological to physical. When Aisha returned from one of her visits to Cemil's home, Esra saw the truth in its entirety. On her twin sister's face and arms were marks that could not be explained. This relationship, where Aisha was threatened with her family and sister, was no longer a love story, but a dangerous story of confinement that Aisha was trying to escape, but couldn't. Those unexplained marks on her sister's skin destroyed Esra's last shred of patience. This was the final straw. The psychological pressure she had worried about had now turned into a tangible, physical danger. Staying silent was no longer an option. She had to save her twin, her companion, from this situation. She confronted Aisha, telling her that this relationship was not love but an annihilation, that this man was tearing her away from her dreams, and that she had to turn back from this dark path immediately. Cemil saw Esra as the biggest obstacle to his absolute control over Aisha. Disturbed by this unshakable bond between Aisha and her twin, he convinced himself that their private messages were being read by Esra. This paranoia took the pressure to a digital level. Cemil demanded that Aisha delete all her conversations with him immediately. Because he didn't trust her, he forced her to prove she had complied by sending him a picture of the blank screen after the conversations were deleted. Aisha was now under surveillance, every digital step she took being monitored. This spiral of fear had trapped Aisha in a dilemma. In a private conversation with Ezra, she confessed her helplessness. "I want to leave him too," she said, "but I can't. I have to stay for now, to protect you and myself." Ayşe was aware that Cemil posed a threat not only to her, but to her loved ones, her family, and her twin sister. This was an impasse she had to endure silently, caught between her instinct to protect her family and her own safety. On July 9th, Cemil called Ayşe to his apartment. Due to the impasse she was in, Ayşe had no choice but to accept the invitation. Just a few hours after arriving at that apartment, she called her sister Ezra, asking her to gather all the gifts Cemil had bought, especially the engagement ring, and bring them to the apartment immediately. In her later testimony, Ezra would clearly recall that her sister's voice was quite uneasy at that moment. But at that instant, Ezra focused less on the fear in her sister's voice and more on the meaning of the call. The thought that this relationship was finally over. With the joy of her sister's potential liberation, she gathered the requested items, went to Cemil's apartment, and rang the bell. When Ezra rang the bell, Cemil opened the door just wide enough for his body to fit through. Ezra, who was on bad terms with him due to her efforts to protect her twin, was prepared for a tense confrontation. But she found someone she didn't expect. Cemil was speaking in a surprisingly calm, close, and friendly manner. It was as if the oppressive, violent man Ezra knew was gone, and a new, kinder man had taken his place. Ezra held out the items and asked him to call her sister. At that moment, Cemil's friendly mask fell. His face suddenly took on an emotionless, cold expression. He said Aisha wasn't home, that she had already left. This brazen and obvious lie ignited the anxiety Ezra had been holding back. The false silence in the doorway shattered. Ezra raised her voice, her eyes fixed on the tangible evidence in front of the door, and shouted, "Aisha's shoes are right here." Although there is little public information about Cemil's past, his career in the police department offered important clues about his character. While an ordinary police officer, he began to display a lifestyle difficult to explain on a civil servant's salary. This sudden enrichment and high-spending profile quickly caught the attention of his superiors. Soon, serious rumors circulated about the source of this money. Deliberate allegations that he was taking bribes and facilitating the sale of illegal substances. These claims were taken so seriously that an inspector was assigned and an official investigation was launched. The investigation process increased the pressure on Cemil and triggered his excessively aggressive behavior. Before the investigation was even concluded, Cemil lost control during an argument with a civilian in the middle of the street. He pulled out his weapon and fired into the air in front of everyone. This act was the final straw for his career. The investigating inspectors could not prove the allegations of bribery and substance trafficking with concrete evidence. However, even if Cemil was cleared of these charges, he was dismissed from the police force due to his aggressive behavior and, most importantly, for discharging his weapon in a residential area. After his dismissal, Cemil met Ecegül, and they soon began living together. This relationship was like a preview of what Aisha would later experience. According to allegations, Cemil was using illegal substances and exerting both physical and psychological pressure on Ecegül. The paranoia and jealousy were at an extreme level, so much so that Ecegül simply thanking a waiter at a restaurant they went to could cause a major crisis when they returned home. Cemil's pressure was escalating, becoming unbearable. On July 24, 2023, this pressure-filled relationship ended tragically. Ecegül fell from the window of the 8th-floor apartment she shared with Cemil and lost her life. Although there were many troubling aspects to the case, Cemil's statement and Ecegül's family stating they did not suspect him initially made the incident appear to be an accident. In his statement, Cemil claimed he was in the bathroom at the moment Ecegül fell. However, the prosecutor's office was not convinced by this accident scenario and launched a detailed investigation. This 2-year investigation revealed, with forensic evidence, that Cemil's statement was false. In the samples taken from under Ecegül's fingernails, Cemil's DNA was found. This was concrete proof of a physical struggle between the two just before the fall. The net was closing in. Cemil was summoned to the police station on July 4, 2025, to give a new statement in light of this new evidence. This date was just 5 days before Ayşe Tokyaz entered Cemil's apartment. If the Ecegül case had been solved in time, Aisha might still be alive today. Hours before Ezra rang that bell and saw those shoes, Aisha had walked through that door. But that day, Aisha hadn't just walked into a former cop's home. She had walked into the trap of a man who was psychologically cornered. The net in the Ecegül case investigation was closing in on him dangerously. New concrete evidence regarding that suspicious fall from 2 years prior had been presented to Cemil just 5 days before Aisha's arrival, on July 4th. The moment Aisha entered, Cemil had nothing left to lose. And moreover, Aisha now wanted to leave him. After a while, she told Cemil her decision. We don't know exactly what happened between the walls of that apartment. However, that last uneasy phone call Aisha had with Ezra shows us a critical fact. Cemil had asked Aisha to return the gifts he had given her, especially the ring, as a condition for leaving. The argument that erupted between them caused Cemil, already psychologically cornered by the Ecegül case, to lose control completely. And at that moment, Cemil ended Aisha's life. While Aisha's body was in the apartment, the doorbell suddenly rang. This was an unplanned interruption. He composed himself, put on that friendly mask, and opened the door. He saw Ezra. With an emotionless demeanor, he gave the first excuse that came to mind. Aisha had already left. Even when Ezra exposed his lie by yelling, "Aisha's shoes are right here," Cemil maintained his cold calm and replied, "She must have left in slippers." Experienced detectives on the investigation note that Ezra, without realizing it, performed an act that saved her own life. Ezra raising her voice in that doorway had activated a factor outside of Cemil's control. The neighbors. There were now witnesses to Ezra's presence. If Ezra hadn't shouted at that moment, experts believe it was highly probable that Cemil would have invited her inside with his nice guy demeanor, and Ezra would have shared her twin's fate. Face to face with that cold expression in the doorway, Ezra realized she couldn't get past Cemil's lies this way. She left. In a panic, she repeatedly called her twin, but the phone didn't answer. First, she went to the student dormitory where they lived together. Aisha had never arrived. With growing fear, as a last resort, she took refuge at the nearest police station. Ezra described the strange moments, her sister's uneasy call, and the shoes at the door. But when she uttered the name, Cemil, the air in the room changed. The officers looked at each other. Ezra had unknowingly walked into the very station where Cemil used to work. She was met with a pro-Cemil attitude. The police told her Aisha was an adult, that she could stay wherever she wanted, and that they needed concrete evidence or a court order to search Cemil's home. Ezra was, without realizing it, hitting the first and coldest wall in her fight for justice. She didn't give up. Ezra insisted on that court order and began to wait. But just 10 minutes after leaving the station, her phone rang. It was Cemil, and Cemil knew every detail of the statement Ezra had just given to the police. He threatened Ezra, using the private information she had just recounted at the station. Ezra's cry for help had been delivered directly to the perpetrator himself, before it ever reached a courtroom. Ezra's persistent fight and the threatening phone call from Cemil finally set the legal process in motion. When the search warrant was issued, police went to Cemil's apartment, but no one was home. The real turning point of the investigation was the security camera footage that no one had watched until then. When the teams reviewed the recordings, they were confronted with images they would never forget. First, Aisha and Cemil entering the building. Then, Cemil and the taxi driver, whom he had agreed to pay $10,000 to dispose of the suitcase, exiting the building. The way Cemil lifted the suitcase into the taxi's trunk was concrete proof that its contents could not have been physically light. Now knowing they were conducting a forensic investigation, not a missing person case, the teams returned with a locksmith to enter the apartment. But when they arrived at the door, they were met with a shocking scene. The door was already open. Inside were two cleaning personnel, whom Cemil had likely called and sent there after getting information from his connections at the station. The police stopped the women just as they were about to start cleaning. When the apartment was examined, everything seemed normal at first glance, until a sharp smell became apparent. The intense smell of paint.
The apartment had been hastily painted red to conceal all the evidence. The police meticulously reviewed 200 hours of security camera footage to trace the route taken by Cemil and the taxi driver. This review revealed that the pair had stopped at one point to buy deodorant, which they likely sprayed on the suitcase to mask any spreading odor. The end of their route was a wooded area where they had dumped the suitcase. With this concrete evidence, Cemil and his accomplice, the taxi driver, were quickly apprehended. When the statements were taken, the taxi driver gave the most predictable defense. "I didn't know what was inside." Cemil's statement was a repeat of the accident scenario from the Ecegül case. Cemil claimed he was under the influence of an illegal substance during the incident. He said Aisha had fallen down the stairs and lost her life, and that he had panicked. He confessed that in this panic, he had compromised her body's integrity to fit it into the suitcase. As a result of the fight for justice initiated by Ezra and the forensic investigation, the perpetrators involved were caught. A total of 6 people were arrested, including not only Cemil and the taxi driver, but also the police officers who were found to have helped Cemil by leaking information at the station. As of the preparation of this video, the suspect's trial is ongoing. Legal experts predict that, in light of the concrete evidence collected, Cemil Koç will receive a sentence that ensures he never leaves prison. His accomplice, the taxi driver, is expected to receive up to 18 years, while the police officers who assisted in tampering with evidence and abused their power are expected to face up to 6 years in prison. The justice process is working for Cemil Koç and the accomplices who helped him. The law will make the perpetrator and his enablers pay the price for these actions. But no court ruling will bring Aisha back. Aisha was 22 years old. She had come to Istanbul with her twin sister, Ezra, to build a better future, to earn her nursing diploma, and to help people. Her dream was to save lives. But her life was ended by a former police officer. Aisha's legacy is not just the courageous fight for justice waged by her twin sister. Her legacy is hidden in that systemic question we asked at the beginning of the video. Why were the warning signs from the Ecegül case not seen in time? Why was a perpetrator exhibiting a dangerous pattern of behavior not stopped before he could cross paths with Aisha? Ayşe Tokyaz is more than just a name in this investigation. She was a student with dreams, a trusted friend, and a twin sister. We must remember her not only for how she died, but most of all, for how she wanted to live.